Welcome to the Growing in Love for Life podcast, where it's all about saving and strengthening your marriage and creating the relationship you really deserve and want to have. And now, from growinginloveforlife.com, relationship and marriage coach and best-selling author, your host, Liam Naden.
This is episode 58 of the Growing in Love for Life podcast. Hello everyone, it's Liam Naden here again. And in this new episode of this podcast, I want to talk about something to help people get a breakthrough in saving their marriage. And in fact, I've made this breakthrough in the form of a question that I think will really help you. Because what I'm finding and what I hear from people is that many people are struggling in their marriage. And probably the reason you're listening to this is that you are. And perhaps your husband or your wife has told you that they want to leave, that they're not happy in their marriage. And when people get news like that, or when their marriage starts to go in the wrong direction, they start to feel a great sense of struggle. And perhaps you are as well. Perhaps you're trying really hard to save your marriage. You're doing as many things as you can. But maybe things aren't working, and maybe things are still going in the direction you don't want them to go in. So you're looking for a breakthrough. So that's what I want to cover today, and I think in this podcast, the question I'm going to ask you hopefully will enable you to get a breakthrough in really changing the direction of where your marriage is going, into a positive direction. Now, I must say just before we start that this question I'm going to cover today, or this breakthrough, is really just a snapshot of a section in one of my programs. And if you really do want a breakthrough, if you really want to know the right things to do and the wrong things to stop doing, then I really highly recommend you try one or both of my marriage programs. There's my 7-day Stop Your Divorce When Your Spouse Doesn't Want To program, which is going to really turn things around and get the ship moving in the right direction, if you like, if your spouse has told you they want to leave. And there's my 30-day program, which is a much more in-depth program about not only creating breakthroughs in your marriage, but also breakthroughs for yourself and changing yourself and learning much more the ways to communicate and to create a much better relationship with your partner or your spouse. So please have a look at those. I really encourage you to try those. They're the material that really works. And in fact, just as an aside, I get comments from people all the time about how much these programs help them. And I got one the other day I wanted to share with you. Someone emailed me and say, "Hi Liam, I really had to share this with you and send heartfelt thanks for your inspirational program. My husband and I have had a complete 180-degree turnaround and have just shared 4 days that felt like a honeymoon. We've talked about so many things and are both very excited for our future. I can't believe how happy we both feel, and I'm certain that what I learnt on your program has greatly influenced how I've approached our relationship. We both realise that our marriage can never be taken for granted and really value what we've been given another chance. Thank you again for all your support." So that's just one of the comments I get about these programs. So this is the sort of breakthroughs that people are getting. So if you're really struggling with your marriage, these podcasts, I've really provided these as a bit of a snapshot, some ideas to help you. But if you really want that major breakthrough, if you really want to get your marriage back together, please take a look at my programs, which are on my website, liamnaden.com. All right, well, in the meantime, let's look at the topic for today's podcast. Let's give you a breakthrough in saving your marriage today. And as I've said in the title, this is a question. And this is a question that I think when you hear what it is, it's going to turn some lights on in your mind. And it's going to get you thinking in a different way about your marriage. And very often when I ask people this question, there's a long pause because it's something they haven't really considered before. But they also realize how intensely, incredibly powerful this question is. Well, actually, it's 2 questions, and here they are. First question, why should your spouse want to stay married to you? And why should they love you? Think about that. Why should your spouse want to stay married to you? Why should they love you? Now, if they've told you they don't love you anymore, perhaps they say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, and I want to leave my marriage and things aren't going well, you need to ask yourself this question. Why should they want to stay married to you, and why should they love you? Now, generally when I ask people this question, after they pause and then start thinking about it, they usually give me answers such as, well, because we have a lot of history together. We've been together and we've shared some wonderful times together, and we'll lose all that, and I don't want to throw all that away, and they shouldn't want to throw it away as well. Or we've built up a lot together, not just emotional things and physical assets as well, but we have a lot that would be thrown away, that would disappear if our marriage ended. Some people also say we have a lot of potential. You know, we've had some rough times, but we've had some great times, and we can get all those things sorted out, and we've got so much potential in our relationship, in our marriage. And because we have had wonderful times, we can have those again. Some people also say things like, well, they'd be breaking up the family. You know, it wouldn't be fair on the children. Or it would really break up what could be a lovely family unit, and we should stay together for that reason. And people also use this one. Well, the reason they should stay married to me is because I love them. And also because I know that deep down they really love me. So perhaps you've come up with some of these reasons. Or perhaps they're things that are coming into your mind as to why you think your spouse should stay married to you. But really, let's look at this in a lot more detail, because here's the key. The truth is, if you want to save your marriage, you have to look at things from your spouse's perspective, not your own perspective. You can't look at what you want, you have to look at what they want. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be a doormat and just give in to anything that they ask you or that they tell you that they want. But you can't convince them to stay out of guilt, out of fear, out of any sort of manipulation. You can only get your husband or your wife to want to stay in your marriage by getting them to want to stay. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? And how much they want to stay is going to depend on how worthwhile you make it for them to stay. So really, I've got a lot more questions to ask you here about that will give you more insight into these questions. Why should your spouse want to stay married to you? Why should they love you? Perhaps they've told you they want to have an affair, or maybe they are having an affair, or they want to get involved with someone else, and you're thinking, well, why are they loving them and not me? There's some real clues there. So let's look at this. Why should your spouse want to stay married to you? Why should they love you? So let me ask you, are you optimistic when you're around them? Are you positive? Are you fun to be around? Are you enthusiastic? Are you the sort of person that when they walk in the door, every time they see you, you're excited about life, you're enthusiastic, you've got lots of fun things and exciting things to share with them? Do you inspire them? Do you make them feel good? Do you have so much positive energy that's bursting out of you, that you so much enthusiasm and passion and fun for life, that you inspire them, that you encourage them to do their best, and not only to do their best, but do you encourage them and inspire them to see how great their life could be with you? And here's another one. Are you exciting? Are you exciting to be around? And people say, well, you know, excitement's not really a part of a marriage if you've been together for however long, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Well, why not? Because when you think about it, if your husband or your wife wants to leave you, perhaps that's what they're looking for. Some excitement, particularly if they're getting involved with someone else. So why can't you be exciting? These are all reasons, aren't they, why your spouse might want to stay married to you, and why they would want to stay in love with you. And here's another one. Are you easygoing? Are you easy to be around? Are you the sort of person, when your spouse, when your husband or your wife walks in the door, what's the first thing you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about problems, or do you want to talk about fun things, interesting things, things that show some insight and hope and inspiration again for the future? And are you an interesting person to be around? Again, people say to me, well, I've been together with my husband or my wife for 20 years. I know everything about them. They know everything about me. We know how we both think. And it's not realistic or practical or sensible to think we can be interesting around each other. So what happens? You create a boring marriage. And who wants to be in a boring marriage? Anybody? The fact is, you can be interesting. You can be exciting. You can keep these things alive. You just have to be committed to think or to figuring out how to do it and actually do it. And here are some other things. Are you sensitive to their feelings? Are you the sort of person who always tells them how you feel, how upset you're feeling about their decision that they might want to leave, or that they're not happy, or how upset you are that your marriage is not going in the right way? Do you listen to how they feel? And when they tell you things that you don't want to hear, what's your reaction to that? Do you get all upset with it, which really is a way of saying that you're not sensitive to their feelings? Or do you try and understand them and be at least mindful that they're entitled to their opinion and to their feelings, and that you need to take some notice of it? And again, are you non-judgmental? Do you judge what they do? If you don't agree with something that your husband or wife is doing, do you let them know that? Or do you just think, well, the reason they're doing something is because they feel that it's right for them, and I respect them enough to allow them to do what they feel is right for them. I don't have the right to tell anybody what they should do. They are the only ones who are entitled to tell themselves what they should do and to do it. Now here's another one. Another quality, and what we're talking about really, and I'll get on to this shortly, we're talking about qualities of your relationship. But here's one that's a bit related to excitement, and it's, are you passionate? Is your marriage passionate? Is it erotic? Is it adventurous? And I mean adventurous in a sexual way, as well as non-sexual things. Do you do adventurous things together? And again, you might be thinking, well, it's not realistic. Yes, but it is possible. There are people out there in great marriages, and if you've heard from my previous podcast, you'll know I'm a great believer in looking at what people do who are in a great relationship or a great marriage, even after 20 years, and saying, what keeps that marriage alive? What keeps it strong? What keeps those two people together like glue? In the face of all of the challenges that everybody faces, including themselves. And one of the things is they keep all of these things alive in their marriage. They've found a way to keep the passion, the adventure, the eroticism, the excitement, the fun. They've found a way to keep all of that going, to keep the interest and excitement and positive energy in their marriage. So that's what you need to do. You need to find those things as well. Now, a lot of these things are about your marriage, but there are also personal qualities that you can develop that are going to make your spouse much more attracted to you and keep your marriage much more of an exciting and interesting place for them to want to be, as well as for you to want to be. So some of the personal qualities are, how determined are you in the face of adversity? Are you the sort of person who reacts badly when something comes along that you don't want to happen, such as, of course, them telling you that they want to leave your marriage? But this applies to any other problems. How do you look at problems? How do you look at adversity? Because adversity happens to everybody. Obviously, everybody has problems in life, and things come along that get thrown at us that we weren't expecting. But how do you deal with it? Do you just crumble and get all upset and look to your husband or your wife or to somebody else to try and solve the problems for you? Or do you blame them or blame somebody else for maybe what's happening? And do you just basically fail to take responsibility? Or do you have some determination and positive attitude and say, well, this is a challenge, but there's always a way to overcome a challenge. Because that's a very positive or a very powerful and very attractive quality that you can develop. Everybody, and I'm sure including your spouse, wants to be around someone who's positive and who doesn't just get negative, depressed and powerless when something unexpected or a so-called problem shows up in their life. So really ask yourself, how do you deal with adversity? How do you face it? And the other way of looking at that is saying, do you take personal responsibility for yourself and for your situation, or do you blame others? Another quality that you need to develop is your self-reliance. How self-reliant are you? So for instance, if you see the end of your marriage as a prospect, how does that make you feel? Do you feel it's going to be the end of the world? I need my husband, I need my wife, there is no future without them. Or do you feel, I would really like to have them in my life, but most importantly, I'd like to have a great marriage, and I'd love to have it with them, and I'd love to find out ways, and I'd love to get our marriage back to being really solid and great. But I'm not dependent on that. It's not going to be the end of my life if our marriage doesn't survive. Because the point is, if you communicate that to your husband or your wife that you can't do without them, then you might think that that would make them feel better, but you know actually that it makes them feel worse about you, because it makes you look, quite frankly, pathetic. Right, so you need to learn how to develop self-reliance as well. And again, in my programs, I delve a lot into how you can become a stronger person, how you become more self-reliant. And by doing that, you become much more attractive. You become the sort of person who can create a marriage or a marriage situation that's a lot more attractive to your spouse, and really give them a lot more reasons to answer positively the question, why should they love you and why should they stay married to you, which is really what it's all about. Now, I've thrown in a lot of questions here about all of these qualities and asking you, are these qualities that you have? And I'm sure you can see that they are all the qualities of somebody you would want to be with. And I'd be willing to bet that many of these qualities or many of these things probably you used to be, or that they used to be a part of your relationship, of your marriage, particularly early on. So I'm sure when you first got together with your husband or your wife before you were married, and when you decided to get married, and when you fell in love with each other, I'm sure you were both optimistic, you were positive. There was lots of fun, there was enthusiasm, excitement, you inspired each other. Probably lots of passionate, erotic adventure as well. You were learning about each other. You were exciting, you were interesting. You focused on the positive things, not the negative things. You didn't dwell on problems. You said, well, if we have problems, I'm sure we can solve them, and let's get on and have more fun and focus on the positive in our relationship. So again, they were things that were there early on, and I'm sure you can see now that if your husband or your wife isn't happy, or if you're not happy, then it's because many of these things are no longer there. So this is what you need to focus on to get them back. And instead of saying it's not realistic, realize that yes, it is. This is very realistic. And if you really want to save your marriage, you need to develop yourself into the person who's really irresistible to them. Just like you used to be. Presumably you were irresistible to them when you first got together, because that's why you've got married. So you need to be that irresistible person again. You need to be the one who's their best option. That if they're thinking about all of the people they could be with, who's the most irresistible? Who's the most fun, optimistic? Who's got the best qualities? Who's the most determined? All the things we've been talking about. Who's the most sensitive to their feelings? Who's the most non-judgmental? You want that to be you. Okay, so in conclusion, I think if you really work with these questions, why should your spouse want to stay married to you? Why should they love you? And you're really honest with yourself in your answers, that will create the breakthrough for you in saving your marriage, and it will get you moving in a different direction. And that's what you need to do. If you've been struggling away and trying to figure out how to save your marriage, and people say to me, I've tried everything, then you need to change direction. If you're not getting the results you want, you need to do something different. It's not about just persevering, trying, and carrying on doing the same thing and hoping things will get better. No, they won't. Whatever you're doing now, whatever direction you're going in, the only way to change that direction is by doing something different. So please look at those questions. Why should your spouse want to stay married to you? Why should they love you? Think about all the other questions I've thrown at you there as to reasons why they should want to, and really start working on yourself. And what you realize is that saving your marriage is really about working on yourself. It's not about trying to manipulate or convince your husband or your wife that they've made the wrong decision and they should stay with you, and that somehow, hoping things will magically turn out right. It's really about changing yourself. It's about developing yourself. And the amazing thing is, two good things about that. One is, the only person you have any control over changing is yourself. So that's great news. You can actually do the one thing that will make a difference, which is working on yourself. You'll never change anyone else. But you can change other people by you changing. Because when you change people's responses to you. And that's definitely the case with a marriage. It's probably why your marriage sort of has gone in the wrong direction that it has. And it's how you can get it back, by changing and developing yourself. And again, can I just say that in these podcasts, I'm giving you lots of snapshots here, but if you really want a plan, if you really want some deep information on how to change yourself, how to develop yourself, how to understand yourself, how to understand what you're doing, how to understand what you're doing that's not working, and most importantly, I guess, why you're doing what you're doing that's not working, and how to use all that to really turn your marriage around, then please have a look at my programs, because that's what they're all about, and that's why they really do create breakthroughs. So please join me on one of my programs and let me help you get your marriage really back on track to being the passionate, exciting place that you really want it to be. Thanks for listening. I've enjoyed sharing this with you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye for now.